Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Haunted Book Club podcast. We'll start off like we always do with Bean's joke of the day.
Why did the doctor tell the sad ghost to take lots of rides in the elevator? She thought it would raise those spirits.
Our story today is called A Ghost Story by Mark Twain. I took a large room far up Broadway in a huge building whose upper stories had been wholly unoccupied for years until I came. The place had long been given up to dust and cobwebs, to solitude and silence. I seemed groping among the tombs and invading the privacy of the dead. The first night I climbed up to my quarters, and for the first time in my life, a superstitious dread came over me. And as I turned the dark angle of the stairway, and an invisible cobweb slung a slazy woof in my face and clung there, I shuddered as one does when encountering a phantom. I was glad enough when I reached my room and locked out the mold and darkness. A cheery fire was burning in the grate, and I sat down there thinking of bygone times, recalling old stories, and summoning half-forgotten faces out of the mists of the past. Listening, in fancy, to voices that long ago grew silent for all time, and to once familiar songs that nobody sings now. And as my reverie softened, down to a sadder and sadder pathos, the shrieking of the wind outside softened to a wail. The angry beating of the rain against the panes diminished to a tranquil patter, and one by one the noises in the street subsided until the hurrying footsteps of the last belated straggler died down in the distance, and no sound was left behind. Fire had burned down low. A sense of loneliness crept over me. I arose and undressed, moving on tiptoes around my room, doing stealthily what I had to do, as if I were environed by sleeping enemies whose slumber would be fatal to break. I covered up in bed and lay listening to the rain and the wind and the faint creaking of distant shutters till they lulled me to sleep. I slept profoundly, but for how long, I don't know. All at once I found myself awake, filled with a shuddering expectancy. All was still, all but my own heart. I could hear it beat. Presently the bedclothes began to slip away slowly towards the foot of the bed, as if someone were pulling them. I could not stir. I could not speak. Still, the blankets slipped deliberately away till my breast was uncovered. Then, with great effort, I seized on them and drew them over my head. I waited, listened, and waited some more. And once more, steady pull began. And once more I lay torpid, a century of dragging seconds till my breast was naked again. At last I roused my energies and snatched the covers back to their place and held them with a strong grip. I waited. By and by, I felt the faint tug and took fresh grip. The tug strengthened to a steady strain. It grew stronger and stronger. My hold parted, and for the third time the blankets slipped away. I groaned, and an answering groan came from the foot of the bed. Beaded drops of sweat stood there on my forehead. I was more dead than alive. Presently I heard a heavy footstep in my room, the step of an elephant. It seemed to me it was not like anything human, but it was moving from me, and there was relief in that. I heard it approach the door, and pass through without moving bolt or lock, and wander away among the dismal corridors, straining the floors and joists till they creaked again as it passed. And then silence reigned once more. When my excitement calmed, I said to myself, "This is all a dream, simply a hideous dream." And so I lay thinking it over until I convinced myself that it was a dream. And then a comforting laugh relaxed my lips and I was happy again. I got up and struck the light, and when I found that the locks and bolts were just as I had left, another soothing laugh welled my heart and rippled from my lips. I took my pipe and lit it, and was just sitting down before the fire when down went the pipe out of my nerveless fingers, and blood forsook my cheeks. A placid breathing was cut short with a gasp. In the ashes of the hearth, side by side with my own footprint, was another, so vast in comparison that mine looked like that of an infant. Then there had been a visitor. The elephant tread was explained. I pulled out the light and returned to bed. Palsied with fear, I lay for a long time, peering into the darkness and listening. I heard a grating noise overhead, like dragging a heavy body across the floor. Then the throwing down of the body and the shaking of the windows in response to the concussion. In distant parts of the building, I heard a muffled slamming of doors, and I heard, in intervals, stealthy footsteps creeping in and out of the corridors and up and down the stairs. Sometimes these noises approached my door, hesitated, then went away. I heard the clanking of chains faintly in remote passages, and listened while the clanging grew nearer, while it wearily climbed the stairs, marking each move by the loose surplus of chains that fell with an accented rattle upon the succeeding step as the goblin that bore them advanced. I heard muttering sentences, half-uttered screams that seemed smothered violently, and the swish of invisible garments and the rush of invisible wings. But I became conscious that my chamber was invaded, that I was not alone. I heard sighs and breathing about my bed, and mysterious whispering. 3 spheres of soft phosphorescent light appeared on the ceiling directly over my head. They clung and glowed there a moment, then dropped, 2 of them upon my face and 1 upon my pillow. They splattered liquidly and felt warm. Intuition told me that they had turned to gouts of blood as they fell. I needed no light to satisfy that. Then I saw pallid faces, dimly luminous, and white uplifted hands floating bodilessly in the air, floating a moment, then disappearing. The whispering ceased, and the voices and the sounds and the solemn stillness followed. I waited and listened. I felt that I must have light or die. I was weak with fear. Slowly I raised myself forward to a sitting posture, and my face came in contact with a clammy hand. All strength went from me, apparently. I fell back as a stricken invalid. Then I heard a rustle of garment. It seemed to pass out the door and go. When everything was still once more, I crept out of bed, sick and feeble. I lit the gas with a hand that trembled as if it had aged 100 years. The light brought some little cheer to my spirit. I sat down and fell into dreamy contemplation of that great footprint in the ashes. By and by, its outlines began to waver and grow dim. I glanced up at the broad gas flame and was slowly wilting away. In the same moment, I heard an elephantine tread wilting away. In the same moment, I heard that elephantine tread again. I noted its approach, nearer and nearer. Along the musty halls, and dimmer the light waned. The tread reached my very door and paused. The light had dwindled to a sickly blue, and all things about me lay in a spectral twilight. The door did not open, and yet I felt a gust of wind fan my cheek, and presently was conscious of a huge cloudy presence over me. I watched it with fascinated eyes. The pale glow stole over the thing. Gradually its cloudy folds took shape. An arm appeared, then legs, a body. At last a great sad face looked out of its vapors. Stripped of its flimsy housing, naked, muscular, and comely, the majestic Cardiff giant loomed above me. All my misery vanished, for a child might know that no harm could come with the benign countenance. My cheerful spirits returned at once, and sympathy with them as the gas flamed up brightly again. Never a lonely outcast was so glad to welcome company as I was to greet the friendly giant. I said, "Why, it's nobody but you. Do you know, I've been scared to death for the last 2 or 3 hours. I am most honestly glad to see you. I wish I had a chair. Here, don't try to sit down on that thing." But it was too late. He was in it before I could stop him, and down he went. I never saw a chair shiver so much in my life. Stop, now you'll ruin Too late again. There was another crash, and another chair was resolved to its original elements. Confound it! Haven't you got any judgment at all? Do you want to ruin all the furniture in this place? Here, here, you petrified fool. But it was no use. Before I could arrest him, he sat down on the bed, and it was a melancholy ruin. Now, what sort of way is that to do? First you come lumbering about the place, bringing a legion of vagabond goblins with you to worry me to death. And then, when I overlook the indecency of costume, which would not be tolerated by any cultivated people, except in a respectable theater, and not even there if the nudity were of your sex, you repay me by wrecking all the furniture, confined to sit down on? And why will you? You've damaged yourself as much as you do me. You have broken off the end of your spinal column and littered the floor with chips of your hand till the place looks like a marble yard. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You are big enough to know better. Well, I will not break any more furniture. But what am I to do? I have not had a chance to sit in a century. And the tears came out of his eyes. Poor devil, I said. I should not have been so harsh with you. And you are an orphan, too, no doubt. But sit down on the floor here, as nothing else can stand your weight. And besides, we cannot be social with you all the way up there, above me. I want you down here, so I can perch upon this high-counting house stool and gossip with you face to face. So he sat down on the floor and lit the pipe I gave him. I threw one of my red blankets over his shoulders, inverted my sitz bath on his head as a helmet, and made himself picturesque and comfortable. Then he crossed his ankles while I renewed the fire and exposed the flat, honeycombed bottoms of his proto-genius feet to the grateful warmth. What is the matter with the bottom of your feet and the backs of your legs, that they are gouged up so? Infernal chilblains. I caught them up to the back of my head, roosting out there under Newell's farm. But I love that place. I love it as one loves his old home. There is no peace for me like the peace I feel when I'm there. We talked along for half an hour, and then I noticed that he looked tired and spoke of it. Tired? He said. Well, I should think so. Now I will tell you all about it. Since you have treated me so well, I am the spirit of the petrified man that lies across the street in the museum. I am the ghost of the Cardiff giant. I have no rest, no peace, till they've given that poor body burial again. Now, what was the most natural thing for me to do? To make men satisfy this wish? Terrify them into it? Haunt the place where the body lay? So I haunted the museum night after night. I even got the other spirits to help, but it did no good, for nobody came to the museum at midnight. When it occurred to me to come over this way and haunt the place a little, I felt that if I ever got a hearing, I must succeed, for I had the most efficient company that perdition could furnish. Night after night, we have shivered through these mildewed halls, dragging chains, groaning, whispering, tramping up and down the stairs, till, to tell you the truth, I am almost worn out. But when I saw the light in your room tonight, I roused my energies again, and went at it with a deal of freshness. But I am tired out completely. Give me, I beseech you, give me some hope. I lit off my perch with a burst of excitement and exclaimed, "This transcends everything. You have had all your trouble for nothing. You have been haunting the plaster cast of yourself. The real Cardiff giant is in Albany. Confound it, don't you know your own remains? I never saw such an eloquent look of shame, of pitiable humiliation, overspread the countenance before." The petrified man rose to his feet and said, "Honestly, is that true?" "As true as I'm sitting here." He took the pipe from his mouth and laid it on the mantel, then stood irresolute a moment, unconsciously from old habit, thrusting his hands into where his pantaloon pockets should have been, then meditatively dropped his chin to his breast, and finally said, "Well, I never felt so absurd. The petrified man has sold everybody else, and now the mean fraud has ended by selling its own ghost. My son, if there's any charity left in your heart for a poor friendless phantom like me, don't let this get out. Think how you would feel if you had made such an ass of yourself." I heard his stately tramp die away, step by step down the stairs, and out into the deserted streets, and felt sorry he was gone, poor fellow, sorrier that he had carried off with my red blanket and my bathtub. Sorry to break it to you this way, but the Cardiff giant was a hoax, conjured up by either George Hall or George Holt. He was discovered in 1869 by some men digging a well near Cardiff, New York. It was shown around as a 10-foot tall petrified prehistoric man. Thankfully, a paleontologist named Othniel C. Marsh debunked it. Until next time.